Hello, and here I am with a little mini mono-tangle of Umble. It's Becky from Ivy's Corner here, and I'm going to draw a little tangle for you on my little mini square that I've created. So Umble is a great tangle. It's really bold and dramatic, and I'm going to just have a little practice on this square to show you how it works and give you an idea of how it can be used, and I'm going to put it in a big tile on a different video for you. So here we go. So this is Umble. I'm going to start off by doing dots and a border on my little 2.5 inch tile. I decided to use this instead of a standard bijou tile, just because I had some spare paper, so I thought this would be a good way to use it up. So here's my dots and a border, and I'm going to pick up my pen using a Micron pen, and I'm going to go straight in. I'm going to do there's a few different ways you can do this tangle, but this is kind of a classic way. So I'm going to start off by sort of capping off these corners here with a curved line, so sort of like forming a quarter circle in that corner. And then I'm going to just add a second one and aura that line. So now we have a sort of a ribbon going around the corner. I'm then going to add another really thin aura, a really fine one, just on the inside of this first line. So we have a little band there, and then I'm going to do the same with this second line here. So just taking your time. It's the first time I've picked up my pen today, so if my lines are a little bit wonky, then that'll be why. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other three corners of my little tile here. So I'm not really worrying too much about the positioning of my lines. I'm just going to go for it for this practice tile. Like this. I might just do the same thing on the other two corners here, and then I'll go back to finish my auras in a second. So here is my final little quarter circle, and then I'm just going to add in those auras here. So just taking my time and letting that first line show me where to go. Something quite calming about drawing auras, because you don't have to think too much about where you're going. You just follow the line that's already there. Just taking it nice and slow. And the next step, once I've finished my aura lines here, so we've got these sort of banded ribbons on each corner, and the next step is going to be filling them in with ink. So we're just going to fill these centre sections in. Now if you have a larger pen, like a thicker nibbed pen, it's quite useful. Because I'm working on a small tile here, it shouldn't take too long, but if you are putting this tangle onto a larger tile, you might like to cover the space a little quicker by using a thicker nibbed pen. So perhaps like a Micron 10 or even a 12 or an 8 would be a good choice to do that. It'll just help you to cover that space quicker, but just be mindful that obviously a thicker pen has a slightly less defined kind of point on it. So if you're looking for this sort of, to filling in smaller areas of your drawing, then you're going to find it slightly more challenging with a thicker nibbed pen. So just filling in these nice inked bands, and actually, you know, you can really start to see how dramatic a tangle this is, because it is going to be filling a lot of the space with ink, because we're going to start repeating a few more of these bands that are going to be drawn behind or hollyboard on these ones we already have. So I'm just filling in, taking my time, and you can take as long as you need to do this. Just really enjoying the flow of ink from the pen to your tile. There we go. Just going to cap this line off here, and we're nearly done. I've got one more left. Finally from my first round of Umble ribbons. Obviously here I'm filling this in with black ink, but you could absolutely experiment with filling it in with a different colour and then maybe adding additional pattern on top. I've done this before in Project Pack 25. One of the lessons took us through creating some watercolour space with some black sort of grey, black watercolour pencil and some grey tones, and then drawing Umble over the top, so that you had the kind of the weight of the colour in a similar way to how you would ink it in, but then you drew on top. And that was a really nice way of sort of keeping that drama but without quite so much black ink. So here we go, that's my first few Umble ribbons, as it were. And now, because this is a small tile, I'm not going to have a huge amount of space to fill it with lots and lots of these, but I'm going to basically repeat this same idea and hollybore it underneath what we already have. So hollybore, if you're not familiar, is a kind of a Zentangle related term, which is to draw something behind something that exists. So when you draw with Zentangle, the thing that you draw first is always going to appear at the top of your drawing, and you can then add in things that appear to be drawn behind what you've already got. So we're going to take it nice and slow, and we're going to kind of imagine when we come up to a line we've already drawn, we're going to just imagine we're drawing behind that line and then continue drawing from the other side of it. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to draw my curved line up here, lift my pen, imagine my lines coming underneath, land where it would come out again, and then just do the same on this little one here. So my line's going to come around here and drop in there. I'm going to aura this, so a nice chunky aura, nice wide line, and it's going to stop, it's going to travel underneath, pick it up here, pick it up, and then pop it down here. So there's my ribbon. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So hollybore underneath. You can see how, none of my semicircle or quarter circles or semicircles here are the same, and it really doesn't matter. When it's all finished, it's going to still look super dramatic, even if my lines are not perfectly identical. And that's the thing with hand-drawn Zentangle patterns, is that they are hand-drawn. There's no perfection. So we're going to just aura these two, I think, while we're here. And this is a really fine aura. Just making sure my lines come to the top, taking it nice and slow. And on this side, nice and fine. It's a bit thicker than the other one, but that's fine. And down here, there we go. So that's that one. I'm going to turn and do the same one here. Just auraing along these lines. This one here and here. And before I ink these spaces in that I've got, I'm actually going to just do two more that are going to hollybore behind these ones as well. So obviously, because this is a small tile, I think I'm going to bring my these next ones up a little higher. So I'm going to start it here and curve around here. And this one would almost come just here. And then this one would start here. So the beginning of this ribbon here is hidden behind the first two that I've drawn. So you can kind of see it there. I think it will become a little clearer when we start adding shade. Here we go. Can you see how that one is now hidden behind the other? And I'm going to do one more, final one for now. I mean, you can add as many as you like, really. But because I'm constrained a little on the space here, I'm going to not go overboard with the number. So that's going to come behind this one here, This one, let's imagine it's drawn up here, curving around and finishing here. Here's my aura. And I think the auras are really important when it comes to Umble, because really what it's doing is just adding that separation. If all you had was thick bands of ink, you wouldn't have the kind of the space to separate it from each different line that you're adding. I'm going to now ink in all of these spaces. Now, being sure obviously to make sure that I ink in the correct ones. So these top ones here, well, the second layer as it were, is easier. Just keep paying attention to the spaces that you're adding the ink to is important. You don't want to accidentally ink in one of the bands. Although, I mean, if you do, it's not the end of the world. Just trying to make sure I don't accidentally go over those lines there that separate. I don't want to go into those aura bands if I can avoid it. Lots of ink. You do want to just be careful when you're adding this much ink to a tangle that you try not to touch it, or you at least let it dry before you do put your hand or your finger on top of it, because it will be slightly wet. Let me do this one on this side, and you'll notice that I'm just spinning my tile rather than moving my hand, which is one of the easy kind of things about Zentangle. You can just keep your hand nice and relaxed in the same position that it likes to sit in. You might notice that what I've done here is I've just moved my pen ink slightly in towards this border because I felt like it was a little bit wider than some of the others. So I've just used it, added a bit more ink to sculpt that line and make it a little bit more the size that I wanted it to be. And you can do that when your aura lines are wider. So you can see this one is wider than this one. So when I add my ink to this section, I'm just going to gently move my pen ink slightly further in to narrow that aura to make it match a little more. You can't really make them bigger, but you can make them smaller. And you can add more ink, but then you can't take it away. So just be mindful of that when you're adding yours. One more space to fill here. And then I've got a couple more in the background just to add my ink to, and then we'll move on to shading. Just being mindful here of which spaces I'm filling in, so making sure I'm retaining those little aura ribbons on the side, and just taking my time when I'm coming up against these other ones here so I don't accidentally draw over them. This little tiny space here would be part of this aura, so here I'm going to leave that there. And just enjoying watching the ink move and filling that space, turning it from bright white to jet black. I do love these Micron pens for their strong black ink. This is a Zentangle HQ Tangle, and it's a lovely one for a bit of drama. You could experiment with Umble rather than just having your curved shapes underneath each other in this formation. You could have them in different directions, or just have sort of Umble stripes if you were doing a hollybore tangle. Lots of opportunities. And I do love a drama tangle because it does add that kind of, well, drama to your tile, especially if you're otherwise sort of drawing I'm going to just add this aura on that side, I think, and use that to colour in. I think that looks good. Yeah, if you've got a tile that's got a lot of other texture sort of tangles on it, Umble is a good one to provide a bit of oomph. And there we have it. So that is my Umble stripes that I've drawn. And I'm now going to start adding a little bit of shade. Now, obviously you could go further and add more and more and more if you wanted to, but I'm going to keep it so that we can still see some white space, because if you have the white space, you can add the shade. So I'm going to start by adding some shade around the edges of these first ones that I drew. I do like to be fairly bold with my shade. I'm holding the pencil on its side. And I'm not going to be drawing over any of the black ink, which obviously limits me slightly in some places because obviously there is a lot of ink in this tangle. But if you draw over the pencil over top of your black ink, then it can look quite sort of shiny. So just adding it in the places that do not have any ink, so over the whites or just the single pen lines, is a good way of retaining the depth of black. So I'm pointing my pencil in towards the lines where I want my pencil line to be most sort of accurate, and I don't want to go past into this aura line. So by pointing my pencil line towards it, I have more control and I'm less likely to go into the aura line. So just taking it nice and slow as well will help with that. And then adding some to my additional lines that sit underneath. So the ones that are at the back will look quite dark when you start to blend the graphite, and that's okay, I think, as long as you try to retain some white space. But because we're kind of creating almost sort of perspective where these lines disappear beneath each other, the thing with shading is that you do also want to make sure you retain some white space, because it can give you then the kind of comparison, I suppose, between light and dark, and that's what helps kind of it look like, you know, things are disappearing off into the back. It gives you can't have shade without highlights, really, as the opposite. So it's important to retain some, and I suppose that's what we're trying to do with these auras. I'm now adding just a touch to the very bottom sections. Now you could, if you wanted to, do one ribbon and then blend, but I am going to add all of my shades first and then blend after. It really does transform your tangle. So I'm done with my pencil for now. I may have missed some bits, but I can always add more. And then I'm going to just use my tortillon to just blend these pencil areas that I've added the graphite to, and just soften it slightly. So I just make little circles with my tortillon, and then once you've done that and fixed the graphite in place on the tile and the paper, you can, if you want to, then just gently tickle the paper to move the graphite out a little. But you can see how that kind of changes the look of it immediately. So when I say that you want to retain areas of white, obviously in areas like this little one here, that you can't really do that because it's such a small space. But maybe in this one here, I'm trying a little bit to retain some. Just play it by ear, really. You just want to kind of ensure that there are still some bright whites for highlights, as well as your shades and your deep blacks. And actually, because we've been avoiding filling these white auras, it makes them look even more white than they were before, I think, just by adding that deep black, but also the sort of tones of grey that you get from the graphite. I'm going across this one and this one here because this band is sitting across, so I do want to add a little bit of shade in this instance to those white auras to show that they're disappearing behind the one that's on top. There we go. Just working my way around the tile. Just softening the edges of the pencil. And you can really see the difference between this side and this side and how it kind of makes that background fade away and makes the tangle pop out. One thing you could do with this, if you had a white jelly roll or a white chalk pencil, would just be to add a little bit of additional highlight to those white aura bands, or even like a shine line to your black ink, which would look quite effective. So that's an option if you want to enhance this even further. We're nearly there, I think. Just the finishing touches, making those ribbons disappear underneath each other and softening the pencil lines. And I think that's it. So that's Umble. Really cool, really dramatic, and a really fun one to draw.